Hi, everyone. I was really happy to be a part of my friend Tone Vays' event, Unconfiscatable in Las Vegas. It's the first of many to come and featured a ton of great speakers. I'll be putting out extra episodes over the next few weeks featuring the people I met there. So feel free to share these episodes on your socials, follow us, leave a review on iTunes, tell a friend, and check out thetatianashow.com for more episodes.
Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com.
In New York for Blockchain Week, make sure you come by 230 Fifth Ave for a special community event that brings together the brightest stars in crypto. Saturday night, May 11th from 6 p.m. to midnight. Join Tatiana Moroz, Michael Salvi, Naomi Brockwell, Bailey Rutzel, and more of your favorite Bitcoin friends for a night of music, comedy, and live entertainment. It's free to attend, so register now at CryptoStarEvents.com. That's CryptoStarEvents.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. We are coming to you from Las Vegas at the Unconfiscatable Conference. Tone has put on a wonderful event. His team has also put on a wonderful event. I'm sure it's not just Tone. And one of our most illustrious speakers at the conference is Peter Todd. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So there's so many things to ask you about. You've been a part of the Bitcoin community, and now you have this timestamp project.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with that, and then we can talk about trolling on Twitter? Because I know that's very important.
Yeah, so open timestamps is really pretty simple. You know, if you go troll someone on Twitter, right, you might want to later prove that you trolled someone on Twitter in the past, right? And didn't you say time machine?
Very
to make
important.
it look like you did? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so with open timestamps, lets you make a mathematical proof linked back to mainly a Bitcoin block, though in theory you could do other blockchains, that your data existed prior to that Bitcoin block.
That's it?
That's it.
So who would use that? Why would they? Is it just like something that anybody would use? Can I use it? Is it going on now?
I mean, anyone can use it. Like, literally, the simplest way to use it is you go to https://opentimestamps.org, scroll down, and upload your file. And it hashes it in the browser, sends off requests to these what are called calendar servers, who then eventually timestamp it into Bitcoin. And you get a proof that then you can later use to verify that the file existed in the past.
What about, okay, so I'm thinking about that for a musician, right? There's a lot of people talking about blockchain and for registering your work.
Copyright is a big deal here. And, one of the things this can do is give you evidence that you were the first person to create, say, a song.
But it's all in the same place as where somebody registered any other kind of data. Could somebody, for example, register land there?
Well, you gotta remember, the term registering usually implies authority. Registering is when you say register copyright and you're filling out a government form and they're putting in a government database. It gives you certain legal rights. Registering land, you're registering with the government. You're following the process. Open timestamps isn't about registering, it's about timestamping something. It's just saying, I know this existed in the past. Now, in the case of a song, well, if you go show that your song existed in the past, that's pretty good evidence that you were the one who created it. It makes it harder for someone to come along later and say, oh, no, that's actually my song.
So where are you registering it? Is it on the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, or is it your own thing?
Registering. Right.
Okay, so where are you timestamping it? Oh, no, or is it just a proof?
Well, yeah,
I'm confused.
It's a mathematical proof. I mean, concretely, like it creates a Merkle tree.
Mm-hmm.
And then it creates Merkle trees, right? But what really matters is you get back a file. And that file is a series of mathematical operations called commitment operations. And if you go through that file, one operation after another, the math is proving that this data existed before this data, and that data exists before that data, and so on, up until a Bitcoin block. It's kind of like, what's a good analogy? I mean, it's kind of like, I go give you a set of accounting records, say, hey, here's proof that, I'm in the red or I'm in the black, whatever. It's not like I registered that with anyone. I mean, no one else necessarily knows it exists, but I can prove to you that something is true.
Can the average person use it? Do you have to know all about Merkle trees? Because that was not my bag.
You know, if you want to understand why it works, you got to know all this stuff. But if you're willing to trust the website and trust the tooling, you don't need to know anything. And also, you know, if it, say, came up in court, I mean, you'd go find a lawyer who would then find some expert and then give an opinion on it. So you really don't need to know anything to use it.
Wow. So what are you doing here at the conference? What have you been talking about? Are you really a maximalist? I think you are, but I don't know. Tell me, why maximalism? Why can't Ethereum coexist? Don't you want us all to get along?
Well, so there's a distinction between Bitcoin maximalism and maximalism. I wouldn't say I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm a maximalist.
So what's that mean?
Well, I, like any sane person, accept that the way currencies work, you know, the way Bitcoin works and the way economics works, strongly indicates that there's going to be basically one digital currency. And having more than one, every time you add another digital currency, makes less and less sense to do this.
That was a case that Giacomo was making earlier today. Were you libertarian before you got into Bitcoin, or did you sort of evolve politically? Did you care, or were you just like, this is a really neat technology? And do you say you might not be libertarian?
I mean, I think by the standards of most of the self-described libertarians in the Bitcoin community, I'm a statist.
Really?
On the other hand, by the standards of most statists outside the Bitcoin community, I'm a libertarian. So I kind of fall in between. Like, you know, when I took economics in high school, as an example, as my teacher got to know me, I remember her telling me straight up one day, yeah, you are definitely a libertarian. And I mean, by normal standards, I think she was right. But, you know, I think maybe the better way to put it is, I think governments are essential. I think we cannot have modern society the way we do without governments. On the other hand, I think governments are very dangerous. You know, they're an incredibly powerful tool that has to be reined in. You know, you need protection from your own government. You need laws, and you need rights, and you need tools to enable you to have these rights. Or you're probably going to find out that your government's suppressing you. Equally, when you talk about economics, I think usually free market capitalism is the right way to go. You know, there's exceptions. I mean, I think, as an example, healthcare is one. You know, the circumstances where you purchase healthcare can be, you know, very asymmetrical, lacking information, lacking free choice. I mean, after all, you might be on a gurney in a hospital unconscious. That's not an opportunity to make a business deal.
Okay.
But in general, most of the time, you just can't replace free market capitalism. And usually when the government intervenes, it's a disaster. You know, a good example, I think, is like with CO2. Do we need to cut down on the CO2 emitted? Absolutely. Do we need to do this through heavy-handed bureaucracy? Hell no. Just tax it. Call it a day. Let the market figure out how to deal with the tax. You know, that's, from the point of view of statist, makes me extremely libertarian. From the point of view of the libertarians around here, the very fact I'm talking about a tax.
Yeah, I was already bristling a little bit.
Yeah, so I kind of in that very uncomfortable middle.
What do you think has gone on in the community and on the technical side too? Like, what do you think of the evolution of Bitcoin so far? Are you feeling good about it? Because I think that some people have left the commune and are now back. They're like, oh, forget about all that other stuff, and they're coming back to Bitcoin. There's been an evolution in, the ethos behind it. I think some people are not really as libertarian as others. What do you think about the evolution? Are you excited? Are you kind of over it?
I think the people in the space aren't very libertarian. I think actually that's just a natural process. The reality is Bitcoin appeals to a very wide part of society because Bitcoin is freedom. You know, it doesn't really matter that much like what your political ideology is. For the most part, you're going to think freedom's a good thing. And if you think about Bitcoin logically, you'll realize this is an incredibly important tool for freedom.
Okay.
You know, this is not like a libertarian or a left-wing or whatever thing. Most of society believes in freedom. Now, there's some exceptions. And sure enough, some of those exceptions hate Bitcoin. But, you know, those people are anti-democratic anyway. Fuck them.
What do you think is going to happen in the future? 2019, we had a crypto winter. We were just listening to some people talking about the price. The person with the lowest price estimate was my least favorite on the panel. You don't care about the price. I know. I could see it. Some people don't care. I care. I like.
Hey, you're lucky. I wasn't on the panel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my price estimate is Bitcoin's going to go to zero. The sun's going to explode, and we're all going to die. Not necessarily in that order.
Well, yeah, you definitely would not have been a crowd favorite. But in all seriousness, if we could take away the death part, do you think that there's...
All right, so the sun exploding, you're happy to...
Oh, well, that can happen later. I mean, that's at least like a few years out. I'm just wondering, am I going to be able to live high on the hog? But aside from the price, like, do you think that people are going to continue to have a lot of interest in cryptocurrency? Do you think the price is important?
One problem Bitcoin does have is Bitcoin cannot tolerate the price going too low. Now, how low is too low is tough to define.
But why not? Because everybody will lose faith?
No, because mining rewards won't be high enough to protect it from being attacked.
Wow.
Like, imagine Bitcoin was worth, a tenth of a penny.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are some intern off at some, NSA spook organization will suggest to his boss, hey, mind if I go use the computer lab that you have unused, for the summer? Why don't you use it to attack Bitcoin? That sounds fun. And they go, oh, cool. Yeah, score it up when you're done. At some point, there's so little mining reward that it'll get destroyed for fun, or by someone who just didn't have much, approval. Right now, Bitcoin still has enough mining reward that killing it is really expensive. It's not something someone's going to do lightly. Sure, the U.S. government can afford to do it, but there's enough procedures and process in place that's not likely to happen.
How can we protect ourselves from that happening? For example, I was just talking
US
about a node.
Can extinguish all life on the planet. Like, when you're talking about these kind of hypotheticals, you're fucked. Mm-hmm. They could also go launch all the nukes tomorrow, and we'd all be lucky to be fighting over, three-legged rabbits in our caves. Like,
this is a very depressing interview. You're only giving me horrible scenarios.
That's my job, and the worst, the worst is very bad. Now, the more realistic scenario is things like we kind of have a rule of law, and Bitcoin remains valuable enough that, things go work out. And that's probably, right now, Bitcoin mining rewards are probably like 100 times the sort of idle threats that we would really worry about. So we're probably all right.
I hope so.
But... like I say, there's a limit to how much it can go down. Equally, I could easily imagine it going up. Look at like Venezuela getting their gold seized. That's a very strong sign that if you want to be a sovereign country, A, you may want to go invest in some gold vaults, and B, you might want to go buy some Bitcoin.
Do you think that's what's going to happen? I heard the new Venezuelan president is pro-Bitcoin, or the new guy that they're putting in. I don't know if he's the president.
He's probably going to be more pro-Bitcoin now that he saw his predecessor lose all his gold.
Well, apparently he was against the petro currency that they put in there.
Yeah. Which, I think is just a sign that he's a sane human being who's not dishonest. That's kind of pretty obvious that petro is obviously bullshit. And I should point out, my understanding is, and I could be wrong on this, he's not actually a president. He wasn't elected in, if I understand correctly.
Well, the news just came out a couple days ago, so I haven't been as involved. I had kind of skimmed over it, but it seems like a lot of people are recognizing him as the new leader. A lot of governments
are recognizing him.
Wouldn't the people like him, though? He's better than this other guy.
That's not a very high bar.
Still better than the other guy. If you're drowning, you'll take a crappy, dirty, stick if you don't have anything better.
A particularly cute cat from YouTube would be a lot better than the previous guy.
Right.
In fact, an ugly cat. Yes. Or a dead one. It's not a high bar here.
So we were kind of joking around earlier about trolling on Twitter. There's a lot of SJW action going on. There's a lot of eye rolling because it gets a little bit insufferable. Why are you terrorizing these people? Because besides that, it's fun.
Remember, sticks and stones break bones, but words do too.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that. No, people are getting very upset about all their feelings.
I think my gut instincts probably are be truthful, be honest. And, of course, being really a fairly left-wing person who's kind of also a bit of a libertarian. When I see people who I would normally vote for just or may not necessarily vote for, but, be a part of that community, just straight up lie about things that happen. It just really bothers me. It's funny, like, it bothers me more than, say, things that the right wing does, probably because I identify with the left wing.
Because you think they're your friends and you're like, why are you guys making me look bad?
I mean, yeah, I think that's like part of the mental thought process. It's like, these are my people. Why the fuck are you doing this?
But do you think that you're winning them over and giving them sanity by trolling them? Because when I first got into crypto...
So to be clear, like, that part of it, I would actually say I'm not so much trolling them. In a way that's reasonable. If you took the things I've said on Twitter about the left wing and call that trolling, I think you're being very unreasonable. Now, if you go talk about, say,
you told me you were trolling.
I mean, for that I was referring to, like, the crypto community.
Okay.
And to be honest, I think even that I've tried to actually cut down on how you talk about that stuff, ultimately to defend myself better and make even better point there. Most of, I think, what you would really call trolling, I did that to my friends. And that's like a whole other issue. That's just funny and good fun. But, in general, I mean, I do not like people being dishonest. And I think the real issue with that is that really cuts at the fabric of having a democratic society. We have to be able to agree on reality, to have, like, any semblance of cohesion as a society. To be able to have a democracy, you have to have some basis of reality that people can communicate about. And if you can't even have a video of some kids in, Make America Great Again hats and come to roughly the same conclusions about what was happening, something really, really seriously is wrong. And like that recent incident with the Covington kids. Looks like I've lost a few friends over that because they just refuse to accept the simple reality of what happened. They're so tied up in their, like, left-wing politics that they can't just step back and say, hang on a second, yeah, we screwed up on that one. All right, let's apologize and move on. Even that, you just can't do.
Do you feel guilty for being a white male?
No.
Okay, do you like Jordan?
Keep in mind, like, I live in Toronto, and I live in an area of Toronto where I'm numerically the minority. Mm-hmm. My building is full of people who do not look like me. And it's kind of a funny upbringing I had because I think what that kind of did to the psyche is my sort of gut feel of who is us and who is them is probably quite different. My idea of us is more Canadian. My idea of them is people who aren't Canadian. And being Canadian is not really about the color of your skin in that area. It's sort of ideals and beliefs.
Do you like Jordan Peterson? He's my favorite Canadian currently.
I don't really know that I do.
Really?
Yeah, it kind of seems like a bit of a blowhard.
Oh, man, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. But you don't have to be.
I kind of like some of the stuff he kind of says, but the tone of it's kind of a bit of a turnoff. But, it's one of those things where, I might not particularly like all aspects of the guy. I may not really care to actually watch his videos or stuff. But what's happened to him and people around him is just ugly. Particularly when you're looking at, I wish I remember the name of the TA who, quite famous was fired by, was it Waterloo or whatever university in Canada, who, long story short, won a case against them. Because it was just so utterly unjust how they'd done this. They broke all the university rules in doing that. And then top of this, you get the professors who did this now suing her. It's just, like, come on, guys. It's a university. It's full of adults. Surely you can't show, can't you show videos in class and, like, have a halfway reasonable discussion about it? We don't have to agree on everything. But, we can be adults enough to actually watch stuff and confront our beliefs. It's funny, too. Like, my views are often so opposed to my friends' views. I mean, just look at abortion. I have friends who, like a lot of friends, they believe life begins at birth. I believe life begins probably sometime, and particularly human life begins sometime after birth. And because I don't know exactly when, I'll define birth as the legal moment. Like, you just can't get more opposed than that. More opposed than that, we're not talking about abortion anymore.
Well,
and yet we have no issue with it.
That's an interesting question because, in New York, they're saying that they're able to basically abort the baby up until birth.
Yep. That's
there's
a lot
like
of Canada.
a real baby in there. I mean, even if it's not out of the birth canal, like 2 minutes later, it's going to be a real person. Or would you say that it would happen?
I mean, I genuinely believe that human life, even at the moment of birth, that to me is not human being in the way you and I are.
Man, that's brutal. I don't know if I can get behind that.
Interestingly, if you
why do you think that?
Well, actually, it's interesting. First of all, it's kind of a gut feel. I mean, I've really, really heavily prioritized, your rights on your body. I mean, if you're a woman, you're pregnant, so fucking what? It's your body. You do what you want. And I think also the second part is biologically, humans are a bit unique among animals. There's a few other cases like this, but humans are a bit unique where we, our kids are born at a point where they're not self-sufficient. I mean, my brother actually...
Are you making the parasite argument?
I mean, I wouldn't so much call it... You kind of call it a parasite argument if you want, but, as you know, my brother recently got a dog. Brand new, born, baby puppy. And I remember him commenting, this dog is really self-sufficient really quickly. Whereas a human baby is basically helpless for, the first month. So
I don't think it could do much after first year or two. Even where is it going to go get a car?
When exactly do you say a fetus becomes human? I'm not exactly sure, but it doesn't bother me at a legal level to say, all right, let's just define this arbitrary cutoff here, and because you do that, you ensure that we are biased to the point of a woman's body being her body. That's far more important to me than nuanced technical arguments about exactly when something is or isn't human. But equally, I mean, if your belief is, human life begins at conception, I mean, what am I going to argue? It's every bit as a religious argument in a sense as mine. And I'm sure we can come to a compromise and say, I know, first trimester or something.
I think that'll probably be the happy medium, because I worry about, backroom kind of abortions and that kind of thing being really dangerous. I think that there's an interest there. Mm-hmm.
But on that, I think you're being far less libertarian on it than I am.
I
don't worry about that at all. Because
illegal abortions being unhealthy for everybody doesn't factor in?
From a libertarian point of view, it doesn't really bother me, because I think people understand what risks they're taking. And if anything, the thing that bothers me is because we're restricting access to abortion, now we're forcing people to potentially be in those environments. Whereas to say, as an example, some people would say, all right, if you get an illegal abortion, we want to go and throw you in jail for that. That's an argument some people would make.
I wouldn't make that argument, but okay.
Yeah, but some people would. Mm-hmm. And my counterargument it's your body. Do whatever the heck you want with it.
Oh, man. This is like a whole bag of worms, because, there's a little person in there, but if you don't think it's a little person, it's a very messy argument.
And I'll also point out, I do believe life begins either at conception or potentially before, depending on how you define it. But after all, life to me isn't sacred. I eat meat. I'm happy to wear leather. It's just life. It's human life that matters. And human life is not, a thing that goes and feels and hears. Lots of things feel and hear. Yet we're still quite happy to end their lives. Now, we may have some rules and regulations about it. I can't, for instance, kill a dog arbitrarily. And I certainly can't kill a chimpanzee arbitrarily. We recognize these different levels of life and have more and more protections as they are more and more human. But it's still not human.
I don't know, Peter. I think it's an interesting conversation that could go for a long time round in circles. I want to bring in Julia. I want to bring in some other people. Fight. No, but we don't have to do that. Where do you like to get your information from? You're a smart guy. Everybody's like, oh, Peter Todd. Twitter? That's it? Are there any kind of speakers that you like, or books or news sources? I'm curious.
Well, and it's funny. I have a friend of friends who are journalists, and I think journalism is in deep trouble. Mm-hmm. And I think part of why it's in deep trouble, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons why is things like Twitter are so successful at getting information from sources to you. Like it or not, the algorithms behind Twitter are really effective at showing things that you find interesting. And I also find things that challenge your beliefs, although that's probably because I follow people on Twitter with very, very different beliefs. But, you know, it works at getting new information and showing things. And once you have that, I mean, it's people talk about all kinds of things on Twitter. People talk about all kinds of things and stuff like Hacker News, you know, and you just kind of get that.
Isn't that a bit of a short interaction with people, though? You've got what is like 140 characters. Maybe it's more now, I think. Doesn't have to be
interaction, though. I mean, after all, the powerful thing is people will go post articles on Twitter. Mm-hmm. You know, so in fact, you find about these articles from Twitter, but which publication published them is basically irrelevant to me. If you ask me, like, all right, who published the last 5 news articles I read? I couldn't tell you because I don't really remember.
But don't you want to verify that those sources are good? You know what I mean? Because there's varying levels of journalism.
How good is the media's track record on this? Right now, it's terrible.
Oh, I mean, I'm not making a case for the mainstream media. They're obviously been very disappointing for a very long time. But I do think that sometimes with alternative news, it's extraordinarily biased, or it has sloppy reporting, it has very little evidence behind it. So that makes me a little concerned. I guess that's why I would wonder where you would get your source from, because how do you know that source is good?
First of all, like a lot of the stuff I wind up reading, links from Twitter, is from relatively mainstream publications. Mm-hmm. But usually my viewpoint is as well, I don't really know this is true. And frequently, if I think something's interesting enough to care about, then I'll actually go back and try to verify it. You know, in case of, say, Covington, I mean, I heard about it initially. It's like, I wonder if there's a full video of this. And very, very quickly I found out, oh, that's interesting. There is a full video and it's completely different. You know, and it probably took me from noticing this on Twitter to realizing there's something really wrong here. Maybe 30 minutes, an hour. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think at the time I was, I don't know, probably late at night and I couldn't get sleep or something. But like it works really effectively. Equally for a lot of like tech stuff. You know, I go read about something on, you know, tech related. I'm like, oh. Such and such has happened on Bitcoin. Well, I mean, I know where the primary sources are for that. I'll just go and take a look. You know, such and such has happened on some, you know, programming language I care about. Well, where are the primary sources? It's just not hard to find this stuff.
You know, with time being so finite, I wonder if we're wasting it worrying about Covington at all. You know, I've had a whole bunch of it. I'm listening to all these things. And sometimes I think of doing a total social media diet, but I do like getting my news from there. And my boy, Jordan Peterson, he doesn't watch the news because if it's meant to be news, it's going to last more than a couple days.
I think with a case like Covington, the thing that matters, and, you know, I kind of feel bad saying this, is not the kids. You know, it's, for them, it's terrible what's happened to them. But for the public as a whole, that's just yet another bad thing happening to people. Bad shit happens to people all the time. What matters is, will this be repeated? You know, how many times this is going to happen? You know, is this indicative of a bigger thing? And that's why it's interesting in the news. And that's why it's worth caring about.
Well, you know, the SJW thing, right? It's kind of frustrating for me because, you know, there are certain aspects of me that are feminist. I mean, it makes sense to be. But because they've gotten so ridiculous, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf, and you can't even take them seriously anymore. And I actually think it causes almost this backlash where people just start becoming even more angry at each other and more anti-feminism or whatever it is. So I don't know if those intentions are really going to result in something good and reasonable.
Like, when in high school and like as a kid, I mean, I grew up, I think, in a pretty left-wing environment where, and I still do believe in this stuff, you know, believed in freedom of speech. I believed in gays being able to marry. I believe people having autonomy, you know, people being able to participate in politics, like all this very, very standard stuff. And I wonder if part of the problem is that we were actually really successful at this. You know, we're in the middle of decriminalizing a lot of drugs. You know, marijuana is completely legal in Canada now. You know, gays can get married. I mean, all these barriers are getting broken down. Of course, then what happens to people who invested their lives in fighting this stuff? Equally, some of the worst stuff that happens in the world are in places which are very difficult for someone in the West to have any influence over. You know, nothing I say is going to make Iran a better place. Nothing I say is really going to make Saudi Arabia a better place.
You don't think so?
So
I'm not going to say that's necessarily completely true, but I think that's the feeling people have. And maybe Saudi Arabia is a worse example because, after all, part of it's propped up by the U.S. military. But like, there's just a lot of bad stuff happens in the world that really I don't have any control over. And I think some of the people invested in politics, their reaction to that is, well, let's go fight something at home that I can do. And a lot of social justice warrior type causes, as much as I would actually support them, well, once you start solving all these issues, then you get to the harder thing, and then it's difficult to know what to do. You know, if you have solved the basic problems of, say, racism, but you're still not getting the results you want, well, what do you do next? And it's very easy to create very negative outcomes.
You know, I think people are big complainers in the U.S. I think that around the world there's such big problems. And, I mean, if you want to take, like, the feminist position, well, go look what's happening in the Middle East, you know? So
I mean,
they're, like, spoiled a little bit.
You know, my mom has that kind of complaints. You know, she was very, very feminist growing up. You know, she was very politically active. And now she looks at, like, why are you guys worried about this stuff? There's still countries where women, you know, aren't allowed to go out in public.
There are actual slave markets there as well.
There's people trying to recreate that stuff in Canada. And yet somehow we're just unwilling to criticize that. You know, that's disturbing.
Do you have an opinion on, this is sort of like a touchy question, but do you have an opinion on, like, multiculturalism, or, for example, people from other countries moving in, and, for example, people from Muslim countries coming, they believe in stoning gays and, you know, beating their wives and stuff. Do you think that that's a problem? That's incompatible? Do you think it's rosy-colored glasses?
I'm from Canada, and I think Canada has this reputation of being very multicultural, and I think it's actually very undeserved. And the reason why I say that is because what we call multiculturalism in Canada is actually just window dressing over basically having the same values. You know, people in my building, as an example, they may look different than me, they may dress differently than me, but I think for the most part they believe in roughly the same stuff as me.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
And just because you have different celebration, different holidays, that's not a meaningful difference. You know, you may believe in one God and I may believe in no God, but that's not actually a really big difference if we believe in us being able to have those differences. So I would say, yeah, we curse, you know, multiculturalism the way it's done in Canada is fine, but that's not really what I think people are trying to apply the label multiculturalism to. You know, people, I think, are trying to apply the label to things where you are no longer actually accepting a shared set of values. You know, now you're accepting things like, well, we want to have our own legal system. You know, we want to have, you know, say, Islam-based legal systems in Canada. And that's where, like, hang on a second, is this really Canadian values? Is this even human values? This is worrying. You know, where exactly are you going with this? Some of it's probably fine. I mean, this sort of native justice we have in parts of Canada, from what I've seen, I have no real issue with it. You know, they're trying to apply certain principles that were traditional to their areas. And after all, I mean, when we're talking about natives in Canada, in many cases they do have a degree of sovereignty. And that's enforced by treaty and tribal rights and so on. But you kind of like be willing to ask yourself, where is the stepping over a line where now we're not really sharing the same values anymore?
Yeah, well, people are sort of rushing in with that, and it makes people feel good to feel accepting. I mean, look, I travel around the world. I love all these different cultures, but I find myself being very concerned. You look at what happens in, for example, Sweden. They've got all these rapes going on. You've got Paris is burning, London is stand, or whatever they're calling it, and I'm not really feeling that, and I feel a little bit of guilt, and because I want to be accepting toward people, but there is that line.
And you also get sort of secondary effects too, where the very fact that we have people trying to clamp down on that dissent also means that the degree to which this is real becomes misreported. You know, sure, there's examples of countries where in reality they don't have a problem with immigration, but what they do have a problem with is people getting shut down, criticizing immigration, which then gives tons of ammo to say, hang on a second, this is a much worse problem than it actually is. You know, the moment you start restricting that speech, you allow rumors to spread. and you make it impossible to know what's really going on. Whereas if you let people say what they want to go say and report things accurately, I think that's a much better tool against hate than trying to restrict people from talking about it at all.
What about the Chinese, the social credit system? That seems like a pretty bad
terrifying.
idea. So scary, right?
Yeah. It's, again, being in Canada, I know a lot of people who have fled China and come to Canada. Chances are, like, a big chunk of the well-known to be overheated sort of Vancouver and Toronto real estate markets, that's probably Chinese trying to get their wealth out to try to get out of the country. Of course, China would describe that as criminals trying to launder money and so on. A lot of Canadian media describes it that way. But then again, we're talking about the Chinese legal system. What does laundering money mean in a country that doesn't really have a rule of law? There is no clear-cut definitions here. And I think you probably want to be more sympathetic to people in those situations than we are.
Do you think that there's hope through technology for those people? I worry, I'm a big 1984 kind of person, right? And I worry that the U.S. and other countries are going to say, that's a great idea. Let's keep these people in line. But, they're outpacing each other. I think that the mice will win, but the cats will be well fed, right?
I'm not so confident. I think technology, it can promote freedom up to a point, but it's also a tool that can take away freedom. And unfortunately, once you go past a certain level of fascism, it's very difficult to get out. You can go and, a thought experiment I like to give people is, all right, imagine we give every single person an explosive neck collar triggered remotely, which is basically saying,
I don't know what that is.
A
neck collar.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Yeah. Basically give the government the ability to kill people on demand and surveil people 24/7. Could you resist fascist government under that circumstance? I think the answer is no.
Of course not.
But many people would say yes.
What?
Absolutely.
What kind of fools would come up with that idea?
People who are of the opinion
who think government is good?
Well, my point is, there are people who kind of come into that kind of conversation saying, there's always a way to fight back. The little people always have the ability to fight back. There's always hope. Unfortunately, there isn't. There might be symbolic hope. We saw this in World War II when certain, Jewish concentration camps, they rose up and tried to fight back. But when you actually look at what happened, of course, they all got slaughtered. And very few people ever survived. It was a wonderful symbol of a fight against oppression, and I'm glad those people did that. But did it actually free people directly? No. It inspired others. But, once you're in that situation, you are screwed. And your only hope is to get outsiders to either come in or get the people in power to change policies. And, there isn't necessarily anything you can do. And I suspect China is rapidly approaching that tipping point where all you can do to fight back is try to inspire others.
Well, I think that inspiration is really important. I don't know. It is a bit of a romanticized view, and I struggle with that sometimes because I see evil and I want to throw myself on the grenade. But look, if I blow myself up, I can't live to fight another day. Yeah. So that balance is so frustrating because you want to do it and then you know that you can't. And if you're a person in a concentration camp, you can try and be the hero, but then you're dead. And, good luck with that unless you believe in some reincarnation stuff.
I think you see this too in Canada and our immigration policies. And as an example, in university, I knew a lot of people from Iran, either who'd come from Iran themselves or whose parents had come over. And it was always frustrating, seeing these people, and I think they themselves were very frustrated by this, was they wanted to make a difference back in Iran. But now they're in Canada.
They can eat, poutine and chill out a little bit.
But, there is no real difference they can make in Canada to Iranian politics. In Iran, apparently one of the things that the Iranian rulers did after the revolution was they were very clever and figured, all right, here's our opposition. We'll give them a choice. You can either leave Iran and go to Canada and other countries, or we'll kill you.
Hey, at least they got the choice.
They did. And that meant that they were able to get rid of far more opposition because people were more willing to identify themselves and leave. Whereas had that option not been there, more people would have stayed. It would be much harder for the regime. Equally, Canada, by allowing these people to come to Canada in such great numbers, you got to ask, were we actually doing something good for Iran? We were certainly doing something good for the people we were accepting. They're alive here in Canada, not dead. But had that not happened, would the Iranian rulers have succeeded in purging opposition or not? I really don't know the answer to that. I just don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe a personal decision, like what are you going to give your life away for? If we're all going to die, there's something to be said for that sacrifice. But I mean, look at Ross Ulbricht, right? He's in prison right now forever and ever and ever. Everybody's living off the high on the hog, right? And I wonder sometimes, was this worth it? Because he was such an idealist, right? And who would have known that he would get his head on the spike in such a severe way? I don't know. I don't think that there is a quick answer. I think it's got to be a personal values decision.
Because we're in a democracy with freedom of the press, and freedom of speech, I think he can make a good argument. He made a very big difference in that people heard about him, recognized what he did, what his story was, and so on, and can learn from that. If you take an example like that and transport it to, say, China or Iran or somewhere much more repressive where people don't learn those things, who knows if it's a good sacrifice? The famous tank man in Tiananmen Square. We all know about him, but among Chinese, they don't.
Oh, yeah, I heard. So there was a friend of mine who went specifically there. A friend of mine, Robert Anthony Peters, he's actually making a film about Tank Man. But what I found out was that you can't even ask about what happened there. If you have a tour guide, she said, don't ask me anything. If you have any questions, wait until after we get back to the hotel. Yeah. I mean, just to think of that, it sounds like a science fiction novel. It doesn't sound real, but it is real.
Well, I think the craziest thing about that is we're a major trading partner of China. And, Canada's actively trying to get more trade with China. You're trying to get more trade with a crazy repressive dictatorship that's backsliding on human rights. What are you really doing here? Is this actually good for the world?
I don't know if the incentives of government are ever really in line with the good of the world, other than, being passable so people don't completely revolt. I don't think that they're worried about goodness. Do you have an opinion on Trump? Do you hate him, love him, you're neutral? He's the ultimate of all trolls, though. You got to respect the troll.
I think in terms of having decency in government and truth and honesty, he's very, very negative.
Mm-hmm. Why do you say that? What do you think has been negative? You don't think other presidents have lied?
Not to the same level. Trump is much more blatant about it. The reality is politicians go lie. It's not an uncommon thing. Mm-hmm. But lying to the extent Trump does is relatively new.
What do you think he lies about?
Literally he can go through lists of fact check stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think the real issue there is that once you kind of set a standard like that, you're also saying to the other side, hey, facts don't matter. You can get away with this too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually what we're seeing now in parts of the left, where their response is, well, screw that. We're going to make up shit too.
I feel like everybody was making up stuff long before he came in. I like the idea. So. No?
I really don't think. Not to the same level. It's not like politicians have ever been 100% honest in everything they do. But I think there's a distinct decrease in honesty and basic acceptance of a shared reality to live in that we're having now. You go back, say, to maybe the 70s or 80s when there's, for instance, fighting the ozone problem. There was disagreement on how to do it. Do we tax it? Do we prohibit things? Whatever. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot more agreement that, yes, there is an actual problem here. Let's figure out how to fix it. Now, I think if you had that same problem, you'd be like, no, it's just not happening.
Yeah, but think about it. You didn't have all of the information available then. Our exchange of information is 1,000,000 times more than then, right? So if you had
we
people...
still came to the correct conclusion, which is, there's a very
that
real
might have
issue.
just been luck.
I don't think so. I think there is genuinely better agreement there on facts. And also,
there's so many different options for facts now. And the truth is subjective sometimes.
Think so. I think actually again, example with Covington. One question is, did or did not those kids shout, build a wall? It's such a basic thing. And I saw that among friends who I'd previously respected would literally go say, after it had been so clearly shown they never said that, they would still reference that in their discussions. Yeah, I mean, these kids, shouted build a wall. That just didn't happen. Like how much cognitive unreality do you have to just accept that? It's, if you can't agree on something like that, what's going on?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty objective one. I think when you start talking about science and climate change and stuff like that, different data sets show different things, and how do you gather that data? Well, and then if you've got a bunch of different people discussing it with different agendas.
I think when you look at the more sane stuff, I mean, Quillette tend to be good at this. You look at some of the stuff Quillette's published on climate change, and it tends to be about, well, what should we do about this problem? What is the magnitude of this problem? It's not, no, CO2 does not cause any warming whatsoever. When you see things like that, if that's just basic rejection of science, it's not actually as bad as the Covington thing. Like the Covington things, anyone who looks at evidence could come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, the Covington one is more cut and dry.
CO2 is something where at least you need some skills to understand it. Although at least it's still something where I could probably go spend a few weeks and replicate the basic science experiments to determine does or does not CO2 have that effect on the atmosphere. You can do things like literally you build a box, you shine some lights through, you go measure the light return, et cetera, et cetera. Those really basic questions are not hard to answer. Hard to answer is, well, what do we do about it? That's where you see. In a sane world, that's where you'd see disagreement. In a sane world, you'd see disagreement between, say, the left wing who might say, well, we need to implement, these controls on the economy, and the right wing who might want to say, well, let's go tax this. Like, that's the sort of debate I'd rather us see have. Not the debate is this even happening? And unfortunately, we're having a debate, is this even happening?
Yeah, there's a lot of trash information out there. I think it's hard to weed through it.
Well, I'm a science-trained guy. For me, it seems actually pretty easy. But, I can go sit there and, do some equations on a pen and paper, and get a rough estimate of things.
Mm-hmm. Not everybody can.
Yeah.
But then everybody's got an opinion, too.
Yeah.
This has been great. I don't want to keep you because I think they're doing the Q&A.
Yeah.
But where can people catch up with you and find more of you? Twitter all the way.
Twitter, send me an email. If you can't figure out what my email is, you're a terrible stalker.
Okay. People, get better at your stalking and find Peter. He's waiting for you.
Thank you to our sponsor, blocktap.io. Please go to their website and check out their universal cryptocurrency API to get reliable cryptocurrency data. blocktap.io. Hey there, it's time for the show. The Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show.
Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.